Well, good afternoon, everybody. At least it's afternoon when we're recording this. I'm Dave Walker. I'm the co-founder of the Beta SMB Institute and your host for this on-demand session for our 2020 Leaders Forum. And welcome, please, Kevin Marasco, who's the CMO of Zenefits. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Dave. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. We've been talking about it back and forth for a couple of weeks now, and it really kind of comes under the umbrella of what you described, and it really struck me as the new work order, kind of the order of work as it's now reshaped. And why don't you give us a little bit of perspective or history on Zenefits first, and then a little on yourself, and that'll kind of hopefully form the foundation for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zenefits, we focus exclusively on small business. We call it leveling the playing field for the other 99.7%. And, a lot of technology historically has been focused on enterprise, take the Oracles, SAPs of the world. And there's actually less than 20,000 companies with over 500 employees in the United States. And there's over 6 million, technically over 30 million, but a lot of those are sole proprietorships. So there's really over 6 million real businesses, right? As you know, with under 500 employees. And that's exclusively who we focus on and helping empower them. And we automate all the people operations for small businesses. So this, and this really does three things. Number one, it automates all the stuff you have to do and makes it easy. Things like payroll, HR, benefits, of which 40% of small business CEOs say the worst part of their job. So we automate that, number one. Number two, we help keep them on the right. Usually resonates. Look, someone started a business to do that business, not to do paperwork and administration, right? And then the second thing is we help keep them on the right side of compliance. Which is constantly changing. There were over 100 new regulations passed last year alone by the Department of Labor, et cetera. It's increasingly complex. Small businesses don't have huge HR and personnel teams to manage all that. So we help with that. And then third, which is really exciting, we help improve productivity and engagement of the entire workforce. So not just manage people, but help them do their best work and to increase their productivity. And that's, in today's world is increasingly important.
Yeah, like now more than ever, right? I mean,
absolutely.
So what about you? Where did you come from before Zenefits?
So I've spent the past 25 years in high growth SaaS, a lot of people in workplace technology, recruiting, performance management and things like that, and really done a bunch of bouncing back and forth between small business and enterprise, but all high growth. SaaS was at a company called Taleo that got acquired by Oracle. After that, a company called HireVue that was just acquired by a big private equity fund, and spent the past 3 years now at Zenefits. Cool.
So I like to kind of start these by asking everyone a very similar question. And as we sit here still in the midst of what has been kind of an ongoing crisis for the last 4 months, where were you when this started?
The moment I can't get out of my mind is being in, I'm in San Francisco, the Bay Area. And we were one of the first to lock down, first cities in the United States. Specifically when it really hit me was when we were doing an executive offsite in Napa, and which is just up the street, and we were faced with an important decision. It was what to do with our annual sales club, and we had started this process in February, and it was before we were still trying to figure out what's fact, what's and make some tough decisions, like, right, and your sales team works so hard, and our club trips, a big event, and it was
big motivator.
Big motivator, right? And ours was in Santa Cruz. And so a few weeks before that, we'd just been keeping a pulse on sentiment, and hey, how do you feel about bringing you and your family? And long story short, overwhelming majority was, hey, we feel comfortable, let's do it. And that was the path we were going down. And then as things just, as you know, right, just started escalating and escalating and escalating by the hour. And we're monitoring it, like our offsite got distracted. We're like, this is like we're trying to keep a pulse on this. And then we finally made the tough decision. Hey, we have to take care of our employees and their families. And we think the right thing to do, as tough as the decision is to make, is to postpone or cancel the trip. And so I'll never forget that, because it was just like the decision was weighing on us. And it started internally with our own employees and their families. And that's really the moment I really remember.
Yeah, there's so many remarkable moments, but that's a good one because it brings it right home. You have to make the decision right away, to really ultimately do the right thing. So I'm curious, as we kind of bridge in now to talking about this concept of a new work order. Um, I imagine during that period, you're hearing a lot from your existing customers. And what are some of the questions that they're asking you? What are the things that are the challenges that they're running into that, you guys kind of were absorbing as an executive team?
Yeah, the customers is really interesting. So we work with over 10,000 small businesses, and our customers vary across every industry. So as things began to escalate, we really had to shift into a helping mode where it's less about the typical KPIs and priorities you focus on, and more of a shift to help and trying to pivot to help our own team, pivot our business, and of course, all of our customers. And we're pretty unique in that we are right on the front lines of many of these issues. I'll just give you a few examples. As things started to escalate, insurance was huge. And typically you go through insurance enrollment windows, in Q4. And so a lot of companies wanted to get coverage for their employees. And so we work with a half a dozen of the major insurance carriers to open up emergency open enrollment periods so that they could take care of their employees. And that was like, it wasn't just out of the box. Like we had to there's R&D work. So there's a lot of work we had to do with that. And then, our customers, many of them are changing and pivoting their businesses. So we had to support them with flexibility. I kind of found three situations. One, customers that were just immediately impacted overnight, like their business was just paused, shut down, depending on their sector. Two, folks who had to kind of evolve to a new normal, like they're still running the business, but in a virtual way, right? And that now, hey, how do I manage a team that's no longer in an office? I have no idea how to do this. Well, here's how you can do that. And for the folks who just their business got paused, we had to have flexibility with packaging and pricing and things like that. And I'd say the third bucket were companies that literally almost overnight pivoted their businesses. And I could go through several examples of companies that did that. And I mean, it was amazing. Like one was a spa, and they go into producing PPE, and an events company that overnight basically went into virtual events, and they do big, and on and on. There's just so many stories that really amazing and inspiring, the entrepreneurship. And so for them, we're having to support them in their change and transition. So it was all about change and support. And as things went on, it got a little more complex for us because, we rolled out the PPP, when the PPP loan program rolled out, we have all the payroll data. So we're like, hey, what if we could accelerate? We could provide line of sight. Are you eligible or not? Here's the data you need to apply. We even did a partnership with Plaid to be able to accelerate the application process and help hundreds of companies not only apply, but get the PPP loans. There's also, things like emergency paid sick leave, right? And I like a lot of folks I talk to even today still don't know this, but there's three types of new time off that you're required to offer your employees now. If they get impacted, if one of their family members gets impacted, or they have to take care of a child because they no longer have school or daycare. And so an employee, if they need to work 30 hours this week instead of 40, you actually need to pay them that 10 hours. You also get tax credits for doing so, but you have to have a mechanism to be tracking that and offering that. And so
wow,
there's a lot of work that we had to do on the product side, on the service side, to help customers, in addition to the knowledge to kind of guide them through the process.
I want to dig into understanding even more, what the obvious implications of kind of the first things that came up and how it really was transformative and really what this new work order was. But I got to ask you, man, I mean, how did you process so much coming at you in the form of challenges? How did you translate that into actions that your company was taking? I mean, did you just have a big war room with tons of whiteboards where you're just writing up opportunities every day? I mean, I can't barely even envision how you guys did this.
Yeah, it's I think like a lot of organizations, the velocity is unprecedented. I haven't seen anything, like it. I've been through the past, the dot com and 9/11 and the financial meltdown, and they had their challenges, but I've never seen one quite like this, as widespread and intense. And we basically dealt with it with multiple war rooms on multiple fronts, and pods of people solving those problems. And every one of those was basically not only meeting and collaborating daily, but basically on the hour as things were changing. And yeah, I'd say there were kind of three key work streams, if you will. Well, one was our own team. What do we do to help take care of our own employees,
Hmm.
distributed across, 6 offices across, 3 countries. And right, and different things are happening at different places. Like San Francisco, one thing's happening here. We have an office in, Charlotte and Vancouver and Bangalore. And so we're having to manage all that and what we roll out globally versus regionally. But that was one pod, taking care of the employees and their families. Second was pivoting our business, right? The plan that we had just gone through and planned for months and rolled out our new fiscal plan. Well, that's out the window, right? Like, so
Hmm.
how do we pivot and change that, with obviously moving targets and scenarios. So there's a planning pod working through scenarios and related decisions to that, and then all the product and service for our customers, which was one of the biggest.
Hmm.
And what are we doing to evolve everything from our services, the products, as I mentioned, a little bit earlier? That was like, weekly sprints, like we shipped so many new products just during this period to support this. And then changes to packaging and pricing and things like that. So those were kind of the three work streams, and continuously evolved. And of course, on the marketing front, there's a ton, a ton as well, supporting, similar to the product and services. But we have a small business media site called Workist, and we're covering updates 3 to 5 times a day. Hey, what states are now eligible for PPP loans? Where do you go to get them? Are you eligible for certain insurance reimbursements due to discontinuity, et cetera, et cetera? There are so many issues, to the degree we had actually state governors coming to us asking, hey, one example, one state on the East Coast particularly said, hey, a lot of the small businesses in our state got squeezed out of the loans because they went to big companies that already had pre-existing relationships with the big banks. What are some regional what is a playbook that we could use to help, get loans to them? So it was, it's almost like we're, a toe into the media side with trying to cover and help our customers through these issues as well.
That's wild. So then going back to some of the things that, the early questions that your customers were asking that kind of formed your, the challenges that you were trying to meet. Um, how do you believe that's kind of translated now over this 4 months, which feels like 4 years? How do you think that's kind of translated into what you describe as a new work order? What are some of the elements of a new work order?
So I think what's interesting, I believe what happened is we were in the midst of some major fundamental shifts taking place
Hmm.
in the workforce, the workplace, and work styles. And I believe those were happening anyways. In fact, we have data that shows, but it was happening over a period of time that these transitions were taking place. And with the pandemic, it's essentially just fast forwarded those changes. It's been, a digital imperative overnight, right? And so that's basically been a forcing function for things to accelerate, and shine a light on, companies that were unprepared to deal with some of these challenges, and are working through these, forced to work through some of these shifts faster than perhaps planned. In some cases, it was an unrecognized problem or opportunity. Specifically, some of the shifts. that, we talk about in this new work order, first is the workforce, which has been in a big, state of change. We've had more generations in the workforce than ever before. Now, 80% of the workforce is Gen Z or millennial, digital natives grown up on technology. And that obviously has implications to how you engage, connect, and manage employees today. So legacy ways of engaging the workforce obviously no longer work. And a lot of folks know about that. What else is happening is there's been this blending of the workforce. So it's no longer just full-time employees, but it's going to where the majority of the workforce is contingent, contractors, consultants, gig workers, that can be anywhere and everywhere, right? And not even in the same country. And so that has a big impact in multiple levels, of course, how you collaborate and things like that, but also, hey, what are the rules around how I treat a full-time employee versus a contractor? What about their benefits? What information do they have access to? How do I manage security? How do I have a inclusive workforce? With it being so blended, and so that brings about new challenges and issues. And now, if you think about it now with the pandemic, well, maybe a company just furloughed or shut down a location. Now this other area is doing well in their business. How do I have some flexibility in terms of having different types of employees, and especially now that location, the whole concept of location has a different meaning. So the workforce is one. A second, of course, is the workplace. And that's really fascinating too, because work was already starting to shift. And now we're seeing, from in office in general to at home, and companies across different industries and locations have been on various, places on the spectrum forever. My past two companies, I was basically a, remote CMO, and it was no big deal because we my last company, we started the company, over half the exec team was distributed, and we just built it that way, ground up. Other companies, Zenefits included, started in San Francisco. So it's like, it was used to really centralize employees in one hub, and then two hubs, and then three, and then four, right? And so now we're seeing this shift to where you have everything from centralized to hubs, to not only virtual workforces, but now the rise of remote first. And there's emerging philosophies on this. Everything from, hey, remote first means like everybody's remote. So if you and I are in the same location, same office, we still have to dial into a meeting in separate rooms like we're doing now, even though we might be sitting in the same location, just to be on the same playing field. So there's a lot of implications of that, and now companies are trying to figure that out. And not only does it impact big companies, it's impacting small businesses, but it's impacting the big companies that serve small businesses, and vice versa. So it has a huge impact. It's simple things, right? Like, it's like, hey, we used to location-based marketing, right? Well, hold on, most of the employees aren't in an office. So if you're about to direct mail them something, do you have the ability to confirm their personal address in real time? Right. So I think, that's really, really interesting. And then, work styles are completely changing. And this has been underway for a while, but we used to be in a top-down authoritative type environment, right? And now it's really a bottoms up, where, my philosophy is I work for my employees, my marketing team. They don't work for me, I work for them. I know they can go get a job anywhere they want. They have recruiters hitting them up every day. And that's not just us, right? An employee at Starbucks is being, could go and do rides for Lyft or Uber and on, right? But it's flipped. Yeah, it's flipped that mentality, right? So that's, employee engagement, listening to your employees and doing the right thing for them is now an imperative. And now with work going more distributed, that becomes increasingly so. And I think the last thing is, it creates, there's a lot of interesting changes that starts to impact, how we market and sell relationships. You used to think about doing things in person. Well, as we're learning very quickly, no, right? and then all the downstream impacts of that. And so those are the kind of the three big buckets. But then there's a lot of things that where the rubber meets the road, how that impacts every business.
So in these three buckets, so there's the nature of the worker, first of all. I mean, the kind of worker, which is transforming because of the crisis, the change in really the work process, and then the change in the work style. So this is probably an unfair question, but as you cast your eyes across the 10,000 or so businesses that you are intimately involved in, what percentage would you say have had to confront the just a new worker, a new profile of a worker? How many would you say are just like they've had to deal with it?
I'd say like over half.
Right.
And this has forced some changes on a lot of the businesses, right? Like, and it seems like they continue to change and pivot and evolve. And as you
Hmm.
change, then you have new decisions to make. And it's, hey, now we're not no longer doing this. We're doing this now. What's the profile of person that's going to do that work the best and be the best fit for the company? And then what type of person is that? Where are they? And that's where the aperture is starting to expand. They could probably be, hey, maybe they could be anywhere. Maybe they don't need to be a full-time employee. Maybe they could be a contractor. Maybe we outsource that. Maybe we hire a consultancy to do that. So things, companies were in just a rhythm of like, hey, I'll hire a full-time person in this location to do this bit of work.
And
And they've been
there's
forced to reevaluate that for a variety of reasons.
right,
And you add in all the downstream implications of, hey, my overhead, the taxes, the bit like there, and now there's this big digital imperative, right? Like companies overnight are forced to to be digital, and
right,
unfortunately, that's where companies we're seeing like it shuts down some companies, unfortunately, but there's a rebirth, right? And these companies are reforming
right.
in another way. One of my favorite pizza places is like down the street. They just, went to order and they're like, unfortunately, we were not in a position to survive this. We don't have the infrastructure, the digital, and it's a shame, right?
Yeah, I think that
Um,
it's going to get told, hundreds of thousands of times over the course of the next few months. So, so second bucket of work processes, same question. How many do you think are, as a percentage, are have had to confront new work processes?
100%.
Yeah,
I'd say,
I thought that would be your answer because
yeah.
it's you can't not change your processes, right, in the context of this. And then last but not least, and I mean, it's a really kind of a fascinating piece of the new work order is this notion of work style really changing. And that is not necessarily something that is, premeditatively thought of. It's literally arrived at, right? I mean, what percentage have you been able to observe of companies that are really talking to you about, we just have a different style now of working and we need your help in enabling that.
It's an interesting one. So I think this is fascinating because small businesses tend to be the tip of the spear on this and driving a lot of the innovation and change. So the companies, interestingly, a lot of the small to mid-sized businesses, um, they're driving the innovation. So a lot of them aren't even familiar. They're like, hey, of course, why would we do it any other way? It's a lot of the legacy companies, and this could be enterprise companies that have been around for hundreds of years, and they're like, wow, this digital upstart's doing this thing this way, and not like I haven't thought about that. And we have clients as well. Small businesses have just been like in the same repetitive motion. They have a lot of inertia, if you will, and they're realizing, hey, now that I'm actually on my front lines of this manufacturing, like I'm hiring this, like they actually care about different things, and I never thought about health and well-being and mental health of employees, but now like this is an important topic. So um, more sophisticated ones are aware of the change and others are just doing it, and but it's impacting everyone, and we see it in just some of our annual trends, like the things that are important today are different than things that were important the year before versus the year before.
Hmm.
One that's really important, like right now as an example, is the health and well-being of employees, and this was another one that was kind of underway. Employee burnout and stress, particularly in small businesses, because there's less resources, right? And there tends to be more strain on the ones you do have. So it was interesting to see that bubble up for, hey, I care about this for my employees. If I burn an employee out, it's not good for them. I have to replace them. There's a high cost of that. Productivity, so companies are starting to be proactive on that, just like they were with benefits,
Right.
decades ago.
So I have to imagine that as this has evolved, you guys are sitting around, from just a pure product development standpoint and offering development standpoint, saying, this is something that we should really memorialize, institutionalize, and otherwise turn into a genuine approach, a genuine offering. What would you say are some of the things that out of these responses that you've had over the last 4 months that really kind of meet that threshold? That we're gonna really genuinely try and drive this into our offering as a feature.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. I'd say it started with health and well-being, and one more recently has been, it kind of connects to that, is employee listening and feedback. And right, one of the things we saw broadly across customer base is this increase in employee anxiety. Over 50% of employees said they're worried about their job, understandably so. Right. But that creates anxiety, right? There's an emotional pressure now on the worker, so they're not able to do their best work, which impacts them and the company. And we were able to look at that, but a lot of companies at an individual basis didn't have a good pulse on it, and it's changing so quickly. Just one example, like as an aggregate, employee engagement actually went up in May. Probably because pandemic, high unemployment all of a sudden, then people who had jobs, I'm thankful for my job, but now it's dipped down to a 20-year low in June. And a lot of it due to all the additional issues, right, that are compounding and probably some fatigue. And
but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wow. Okay, so wait a minute. So employee engagement, which is a measurement of their literal engagement with their employer, how connected they feel, communicated with, etc. So right. It jumps up in May because everybody's really truly paying attention to their own situation, their relationship with their employee. But now it's down to a 20-year low.
Now it's down to a 20-year low.
And wow. I mean, that in and of itself is kind of remarkable.
It is, and there's a lot of factors. I'll give you another interesting stat. We just did a piece in the Wall Street Journal on this last week. Time off. So the amount of time taken off over the past 60 days compared to the same period a year ago for companies is less than half. Kind of makes sense, right? Like, okay, there's not as many places to go and things like that. But you think about it, there's a compounding impact because data shows that productivity, technically, people are doing more work. They're not commuting and things like that. So they're putting in more physical work and hours and more stress, and then not taking time. And so no wonder anxiety goes up, engagement goes down. So these are compounding issues.
This is anecdotal, but I've heard from a lot of people that they are scared to take time off because they worry that that's a signal to their employer that they're somehow not engaged. And I don't know, that's unfortunate, because if you really don't take a blow, if you don't take sidelines for a little bit and get your breath back, you're going to burn out, and it's tough.
Exactly. So that's where we're trying to help. We're trying to share the data. Number one, hey, look at like time off. We like it's tracked our system, right? We're like, it is less than half. You need to encourage your employees to take some time off, find some balance. They don't have to fly to a hot spot to do it, but take some time with the family. Second is we've rolled out products that allow companies to get a real-time pulse on it for their workforce. So we just rolled out employee listening and surveying tools and we're doing one monthly for our workforce. So like, and we do it by theme. And so we say, hey, how are you feeling about work-life balance right now, given what's going on? And then we do another one on social issues. What can we do to help? We just did one on diversity and inclusion, and so on, right? But it's a tool where I can have a real-time pulse on my team, how they feel. And it's more difficult to get that feedback now than before, right? And similarly on communication, that was like a second area is companies we found in this new work order having a challenge communicating at scale to this distributed team, or even if their business had not distributed, say it was, it's changed, and how do I communicate in real time where there's so much, every day is different. So if I need to get an emergency critical communication out saying, hey, this location is closed tomorrow due to safety issues, we're going to reopen this manufacturing plant here. Like, I need to be able to send a push notification that goes to the top of the phone that doesn't get lost in email and things like that.
Right,
and so
right.
Those are a few things that we've done that enable more real-time, rapid communication and listening to the workforce.
So I think you'll appreciate this as a marketing guy, and I hope it's not too opaque a question, but in the push and pull of your offering to your customers and even to your prospects, how much of it is you're actually pushing it out to them because you believe, based on what you're seeing with other customers or what your intuition tells you, whatever, you're pushing kind of this advice out to them as their human resources partner, versus building infrastructure to be, frankly, responsive to what their pull is going to be, and say, look, I yesterday I couldn't deal with this when you sent me the push email, but today I need to deal with this. So can you please give it to me now? I mean, does that question make sense? That balance between push and pull that you guys are trying to?
Absolutely, it's a great question. Historically, I would say, like our field that we're disrupting, I'd say, was very much reactive. Systems basically tracking, and when you need to go do something or get something, you go in them to do them, and that's kind of what we're trying to disrupt and be more proactive. And we have to balance that without, we don't want to be annoying, right? Like, we're trying to take work off people's plates. We want them to do their passion, their best work, right? People, not process. That said, where we have insights that will help them, protect them, help them manage their business, that's where we're trying to push that. And lately we've been in, pushing as an example, kind of covering the, hey, here's what you need to know for PPPs, HR regulations change. Here's what you need to know. Here's where it is. And so it literally pushes up in our product. Here's the 3 new types of time off that have been added and what they mean. And hey, by the way, you might be eligible for tax credits. So if it's that important, we're trying to be proactive and push that. But it is a constant balance to, hey, at the end of the day, we're trying to remove friction. So let's let folks do work, but where we have something important to say, we're trying to be proactive on that. And we have to in some areas. Compliance is one, opportunities to save money is another, or some of these workforce issues where we're making them available. And then it's interesting because folks are really leaning into those. We've really seen people leaning into those. So this our traffic to some of this content that I mentioned in the midst of the pandemic, our traffic was up 5 to 6x our normal before it, because people were seeking solutions to problems.
Wow. So I put, you've been a CMO for a number of organizations. Kind of put a omnibus CMO hat on for a minute, and just based on kind of a lot of these really interesting insights that you brought forward as far as the new work order, what opportunities do you think other B2SMB brands have in leaning into this idea that there's really a new work order taking shape? What are the things that, not necessarily products or services that you guys would offer, but where do you see the other opportunities kind of trickling down from this?
Yeah, I think there are a ton of opportunities, mainly because of change. There's so much change, and with change comes opportunity. And seeing the opportunity in that change, seeing the opportunity in adversity, because we're facing with so many challenges, at a macro level right now. But one thing that's true, there is change, and there will continue to be major change. And with that, it's identifying what those opportunities are for small businesses, because they're going to be shifting, and of course, enterprises that serve them. And there's so many. I mean, one learning that we're, Jay, my CEO, and I, we talk about a lot is like businesses taking a stand, and what that means to the brand. Employees are looking for it, consumers are looking for it, and this is something 10 years ago it was kind of taboo, and now employees are almost mandating it, and that's part of the new work order, this work style. Like, hey, I'm looking for a brand that's going to take a stand, small business, and I think there's a huge opportunity for small business. I think we're starting to see it. There's going to be a surge to support small businesses, because that
Right.
pizza shop that I love to get my pizza, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to them. So when I'm ordering, right, you see, I'm trying to order and support small business, and we've probably seen a lot of these stories. I think this will continue, and but small businesses are popping up to do things that they weren't doing before. There's also some big macro shifts that are going to impact small businesses. So real estate is a sector we serve, and there's a lot of interesting shifts taking place, right? So commercial real estate in metro areas way down, obviously, right? The workforce, if you think about kind of what happened is, there were these big metro areas where a lot of work done, and then that became big urban suburbs built when people commuting in, and that created horrible commuting traffic in New York, here in San Francisco and Seattle, and on and on. But now, so if you think about it, corporate real estate goes down. Well, what's going to now they're going to turn that into a more affordable residential real estate in these metro areas, right? Where folks, Gen Z millennial folks who couldn't afford to move there now can, and then there'll be probably an upstart of new small businesses there because of the clearing out of the traditional commercial real estate. So like there'll be new small businesses that are probably local that open up there versus just chains and things like that. And then other folks are moving to more suburban areas, which creates new shapes. So there's all these shifts taking place in some cases, going in different directions, but that means change, which means that there's an imperative, and the digital is huge, because every company's forced to go digital. So I think that's one of the biggest, that and everything that means behind that, right? And then macro changes like newfound appreciation for worker, employee, and just general health and well-being and care, right? And how a decision impacts your employees, your customers, and what are tools to help safeguard that. So I think there's a ton of opportunities, but it's just factoring in what's changed and how will this change impact a small business, and then figuring out how to integrate that into your offerings.
That is terrific advice. And I mean, I think all of us kind of intuitively know leaning into change is a great way to find opportunity and grow, but said really from the perspective of being good observers and good students of, well, what exactly is changing here, and in connecting the dots. And I get a newsletter about commercial real estate in Chicago, downtown, where I'm from, in downtown Chicago, in the month of May, had a 450,000 square foot decline in occupancy, basically, for downtown office space, which then jumped up to 1.5 million square feet in the month of June, with just a massive downward trajectory. Meanwhile, completely disconnected conversation with the guys from Home Advisor last week, and I said, your business is awesome. There's huge amount of demand right now for a lot of the different products and services that you represent. Where are the hotspots? And they said, amongst many things they were talking about, interestingly enough, they said there's the emergence of the home office remodeler. So there are those people on Home Advisor who subsisted on kitchens and bathrooms and closets. Now there's a whole new class coming up that is subsisting and offering, we'll remodel your home office, because obviously working at the kitchen table is not working. And I thought that was fascinating. It's like, good for them, good for the people who are kind of stepping into that breach, but it's a good lesson for all of us.
Totally. And I think it's part of this is staying a step ahead, right? Like, so okay, this type of construction goes down. What's going to go up? This real estate goes down. This goes up. People are moving to this area. And then what happens after, right? I think that's the thing. Commercial, the cities aren't just going to go away. There's amazing, centers for arts, culture, and everything, right? Well, it'll create new opportunities. It might help with some of the housing issues like that we have here in the Bay Area as one example, and many other areas in the United States, right? So what's going to happen after that and being able to ride that wave. And so I think that's where it's I think another thing is understanding, as a marketer, your ICP, your ideal customer profile. And that's something, part of we immediately evolved packaging, pricing in ICP and understanding, wow, every industry is changing overnight. How are they changing and how are they going to change? And just, your bullseye customer pre-pandemic probably may or may not be after and may or may not be in the future, but you cannot just sit on your laurels on that. You have to be proactive on that and understanding that because it's changing, and so do your products and services.
That's in and of itself is I'd love to do a session with you with actually a couple other CMOs about talking about what is this new ICP, because I think pre-pandemic, at least pre George Floyd, pre a lot of things that have happened over the last 4 months, I think we all would have had the kind of data and analytics and insights that it would allow us to complex who that ideal customer was. But now, to your point, there may have been changes in their situation, not so much changes in their persona, but changes in their situation that drive a completely different behavior. And I remember back in the day of trying to figure out how to effectively target small businesses, realizing that it wasn't the profile, it was the moment of need. It wasn't really who they were, it was what they needed or wanted. And I'm fascinated to see coming out of this, what is the, old marketing 101 term, what is the hand raiser behavior that is going to come out to really show, wow, this is a business that needs Zenefits. This is a business that needs pick one, Verizon. This is a business that needs Dell, that would not necessarily fit in or conform to the usual kind of profile metrics.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that's great, and I totally agree. And understanding that and the motivations behind that. That's a big learning. Like in one of our early pricing, we thought, hey, it's based on the company, their size. No, it wasn't. It was actually based on their growth rate, and they were
right.
Exactly. You could hold size the same, but if the growth rate was higher, they were willing to pay almost 3 times more. So it was the motivator behind, right? And that same thing's happening now. Another thing I think that's interesting that we're seeing is really I would call it like a rise of the importance of subsectors. Like we were just kind of in this growth environment where like a lot of things were in a state where they had been kind of at a steady rate of evolution and change in a lot of sectors. And now we're seeing, because of all these shifts that we just talked about, wow, like real estate was a bucket. And we studied that. We're like, wow, there's areas in real estate that are doing awful right now. There's other areas that are like, I talked to someone last week and they're like, supply is at a 14-year low. And wow, like that are booming. And so it's understanding, but you have to drill down into the sub-industries. And healthcare, right? Same thing. Manufacturing, same thing. You can't just say manufacturing. Now, what is being manufactured, why, and how? Mm-hmm. And I think so as marketers, we have to be diligent about that. We have to double click at a level that we haven't perhaps necessarily had to do. And now we really.
Right. No, exactly. Well, listen, this has been everything I thought it was going to be and more. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I appreciate it on behalf of our audience. And speaking of our audience, are you okay, as long as they're both polite and respectful of your time, if our audience members reach out to you and I'm sure there's some people who are going to be, have light bulbs going off and may want to talk to you about prospective partnerships or advice or whatever. You okay with that? You cool with
that? Absolutely, Dave.
Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate greatly the service to the community, as it were. So again, this has been fantastic. And I really appreciate your time, Kevin Marasco, CMO of Zenefits. And I learned a lot today, and I hope everyone else did as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. Likewise, appreciate it. You and everything your organization does to likewise support the community. So thank you for having me and appreciate it. Be well.